Coming to you entirely pre-recorded from the Garage of Solitude in Queens, New York, I'm Mario Francisco Robles.
And coming from you entirely pre-recorded from Long Island in a room I call my office, I'm Brett Miro, and this is episode 163 of the Fanboy Podcast.
That is the episode, isn't it? You're much better at keeping up with those numbers than I am. But let's keep up with you, Bretterson. What have you been watching and playing this here week?
Yeah, so I recently, as of yesterday, actually finished a show on FX/Hulu called The Bear. I started it like a few days ago, and my fiance and I just kind of marathon through it because their episodes are fairly short, like half hour ish. I think the last one's a little bit longer. But if you don't know, this show came out like maybe like a month or so ago, and I remember like it was pretty rave on the social medias. So we were looking for a new show. I said, let's try it out. And I think it is maybe one of the best seasons of television like I've ever seen. Like every episode is awesome. The premise basically is like this, young guy comes back to his home in Chicago from New York, where he was like basically miserable, but working as one of like the best chefs in New York City. Like I became an amazing cook, and he comes back to take over his family's like just like kind of hole in the wall like Chicago beef sausage and pepper like kind of like shack kind of thing where they make just all those like kind of sandwiches, the spaghetti, like just kind of like basic like soul food from like Chicago, whatever, like and he tries to like kind of transform the restaurant and like change it, and it's also, you find out like coming off of it that his brother used to run it, but his brother was like an addict, and he was like addicted to pills, and he ended up like committing suicide like not long before he came to take over the family thing. So it's him like coping with that, but it's also like very, very funny. It's got a great cast of characters that like just work in the kitchen. The acting is like across the board like phenomenal, honestly, and like all the actors are good at like hitting their comedic moments, hitting the dramatic moments. Every character is believable. The writing is like phenomenal, and it's like a really great like dramedy. And I love also like the way it's a very claustrophobic cinematography. Like you're always up in like the lead actor's face. You're very close to people.
Yeah.
The camera's always just like leaning around like a corner, and it makes you feel like you're in a tight kitchen, and like you're feeling. There's definitely like anxiety is like a huge part of it. He's having like panic attacks.
It's just naturally more tense when you're right up.
Yeah,
in
it makes you feel claustrophobic. And like everyone's always yelling. Everyone's always like tough talking Chicago people, and it's like a very like eclectic like bunch of people too. It's just really.
It sounds like me hanging out with my Cuban family, but
yeah, actually, I'm sure we all have it. Yeah, it's like my big loud Italian family more.
Everybody's
like,
yelling. All right,
there's like there's like a black guy, a Spanish woman, like like a couple of white guys, like old school like white guy, like tough talking Chicago guys. Like it's just like this great, just like, eclectic mix of people. It's awesome. Yeah, but like they're like a family. It's great. So yeah, I love that show. It's called The Bear. It's it got renewed for season 2, so you can like watch it and know that there's more coming. And it was just like really, really good television. So that was awesome.
Where can we find that?
Yeah, so it's on FX, I guess. So I guess you could. It's done now. It was like it's like 8 episodes, but FX, and then you could get it on Hulu too, because they have like all the FX stuff on there. I've also been continuing. I haven't brought it up this I don't think at all in the show yet, but I'm continuing to watch What We Do in the Shadows. The new season is out, season 4. So far I'm liking it. I think better than season 3, because season 3 for me was like a little uneven. But this one seems to be better. But it's still a very fun show. It's a Taika Waititi joint. Now that I just said that, I watched. I saw Thor: Love and Thunder since it's on Disney
you're
Plus
the one.
now.
I haven't had a chance to yet. How was it?
So I remember there was a lot of hubbub when it came out. So I just like waited. I didn't go to the theaters, and it just launched on Disney Plus now. So I said, you know what, I'm gonna watch it. I checked it out this past weekend. So I didn't think it was nearly as bad as everyone was like kind of like bitching and moaning about on the internet, but like it wasn't like great. I'll tell you, like,
and that's a shame because in Taika I trust typically. He hasn't steered me wrong.
I like his comedy, like I like it. So for me, I think I probably enjoyed it. Like I'm not sick of his comedy. I know some people are sick of it or whatever, or they just pretend to be because it's cool to say it on the internet. But like I'm not really sick of it. I like his style. I loved his HBO show that I watched recently. Like I love all of his work, like pretty much. So What We Do in the Shadows is also him too. So it's like I love his stuff. It definitely was like 100%. Though, like I think he said this in interviews, it's way more of a comedy and like almost even like a romantic comedy than anything else.
Yeah.
So I think I could see why that was like off-putting for people. But like
Hmm.
since I didn't watch it in the height of all the hubbub and people like shitting on it and just being very divisive, like I just came into it, I watched it relaxed at home, and I had a good time. I laughed. It was fun. Christian Bale has a pretty like wild performance. Like I'm really surprised he did like a Marvel movie. It's he's interesting. He's interesting, but he's actually kind of a cool character. But they definitely it's the same problem with a lot of the Marvel movies. They don't really develop the villain enough. Um, Russell Crowe has like a pretty awesome like cameo. He's like Zeus in it or whatever, and that
Yeah.
was like very interesting. He was pretty fun.
Did you see
Yeah,
our old pal Luke tweeted out a picture of
yeah, and he
Russell
was like, "It's
Crowe,
me."
and he was like, "Oh, I hope everyone enjoyed me as Zeus, whatever."
And
Luke.
when he did that, I was
Oh
dying. I was
man.
laughing really hard because I was
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, a little bit. I get that."
Yeah.
Um, but yeah,
That
like it
reminds
was.
me. We miss you, Luke. Come visit. Come
Yeah,
back to New
come visit.
York. Yes.
Um, so yeah, Natalie Portman I don't know, to me she seems a little awkward sometimes in the movie. Like, I don't know, but it could just be me.
Yeah.
Uh, they do the storyline, the typical woman
Could
Thor
you see the
storyline.
paycheck? Was the paycheck sticking out of her costume at any point? Or,
Yeah.
was it just
I don't
visible
want to say
or
she phoned it in, but like
yeah.
she didn't get the best material also to work with,
Yeah.
and there was definitely some more like corny, slapsticky stuff to it. But I wonder if like
Mm,
he said he wanted to make a romantic comedy and it kind of hits those notes. So like it
yeah.
has a little layer of cheese. So that's kind of like my quick little like Thor review. Like I said,
Gotcha.
I laughed, I had a good time. The thing is, you know what it is? Like if you're like a big Thor fan and you're like really into the comics and I guess how he's depicted there, I imagine this is like a far cry from like the more
Mhm.
serious, like real, like godlike Thor. Like he's like a joke now in a way. Like he's like
Mhm.
goofy. And while I find it fun, I could understand if you're like looking, if you wish you had like that Dark Knight moment for Thor or something
Yeah.
like that. Like it's not it. It's like a very
It's
they
not this one.
he went further than even Ragnarok with it, with like
Yeah.
the comedy and like the goofs and stuff. So I get it, but I enjoyed
Good.
it. It was still fun. I
Great.
guess I
Yeah.
didn't pay for it. I mean, I paid for my subscription, but I didn't go to the movies to see it. But
Yeah.
also, I haven't gone to the movie. I think to see like any Thor movie. Maybe Ragnarok, I might have went, but that was like the other ones I all saw when they came to DVD, and they. I think they're like probably the least liked by most Marvel MCU fans, and I
Yeah.
feel like they also probably made like they're probably on the lower end of money making. So clearly, general audiences not either. So I think this might have worked, and also I still think this film made a bunch of money. So it shows
Yeah.
that while you may not like it, it's obviously working because money. You know what I mean? That at the end of the
Because
day,
money.
at the end of the day, because money.
Yeah.
So that's that. And then really quick, I know I've been talking forever. I also finally got to this game that I've been wanting to play for a very long time. It's on Game Pass. It's from 2016, so it's old, older.
So it's
So
old.
it's really old. It's called Firewatch, and it's what people kind of call like a walking simulator. So there's no combat. You're not fighting anything. It's not an action game. You're basically this guy who takes on a summer job at like a Yosemite like national park, and it's about like you're kind of just walking around doing mundane stuff, but like the voice acting is really good for the main character, the guy you are, and you speak to this woman Delilah who's at another like lookout tower. So basically, you took this job to just like stay in a lookout tower all summer and like look for forest fires, and there's like all the
Okay.
little notes about like people that they like their stories, like people have gone crazy doing it, and it's like very isolating and stuff. But you end up building this like incredible relationship just over walkie talkie, never meeting this other person. And like I can't explain it. I know it probably doesn't sound interesting, but like it's really well written and voice acted.
Okay.
So you're like
Yeah.
totally engaged, and it's very short. Like I 3 to 5 hours maybe. I don't even think I got anywhere near 5 hours. It was like I played like an hour like each night for a couple nights, and I was done.
Yeah.
But I'll go the quick funny story. So when I started playing it was last Saturday, and that was my fiance's bachelorette party. So she was out. She was coming home. It wasn't like an overnight thing, but I was like, oh, I had the night to myself. So I said, you know what? I'm gonna play Firewatch. Like I've heard this game was good. It won a shit ton of awards when it came out, and so I was like, oh, I'm gonna play this. So I start the game up thinking, and I'm not thinking it's gonna be. I'm figuring there's gonna be probably something like a little emotional in it or whatever. Like there might be like a cool revelation or a mystery at hand.
Yeah.
But the game starts out with just text on the screen, and it starts telling you like a story. It's basically giving you like backstory for the character you're playing. So it's like, this talking about this meet cute you meet this woman who ends up becoming your wife, and there's little dialogue options you could choose in it, but it doesn't really like change anything that much, but it just kind of gives you a little personalization for your version of the character that you're role playing as. So you're
Mhm.
picking things on, and I'm thinking like, oh, this is gonna be fun, and it's like, oh yeah, so what do you say to her? You meet her at a bar. What do you say to her? And I was like, oh, you're pretty, or something like that. A couple of options. It keeps going,
You're
and
smooth,
it's like
Brett.
you get together, and then all of a sudden it just gets so freaking heavy. Like I was like ready to cry, and I was like gonna kill myself. Like it was
Wow.
like. It was like, oh, now you're like, you talk to your wife about having kids, and then you're like, okay, yeah, we're gonna have kids, and then it's like, that was like 1979. Then it's like it's 1984. Work got in the way. You never got around to having kids. And then like basically, long story short, spoilers for the beginning of Firewatch from 2016. Like it mentions that like your wife gets like early onset dementia, like in her mid 30s, and like
Yikes.
ends up like forgetting and doesn't recognize you anymore. And like it's like you visit
Oh,
her
this sounds
every
like a
day.
real uplifting,
It's like you
fun
visit her
time.
every day, and then like the next screen, it's like, and now less and less. And then like she moves back home to Australia to be with her parents or whatever. So like, and then the game starts out, and you're starting the job at the thing. But like they give you like this whole setup for like why this guy's there. So really funny. But I was like, oh my god, like heart wrenching, and like
Yeah,
the guy's like around our age, and like it was just hitting. Everything was hitting
it
for
was
me
hitting.
feels. I'm
Yeah,
thinking like, oh my god, like imagine that happened to me now. Like
yeah.
it was
Oh,
really
wow.
rough. So, but anyway, the game was awesome. Like it was beautiful and really cool and subverting in a really interesting way, and it was cool. So
So
I know I just
Firewatch,
gave you a lot.
not to be
Firewatch,
confused with Fire Crotch, the unsolicited, unauthorized 2D platformer about the life of Carrot Top.
no,
No, it's
not
Firewatch.
yeah, and you can get that. That is on Xbox Game Pass. And I'm sure you can still get it on like the last gen consoles, PS4, Xbox One. It's probably fairly cheap. I can't
Hey,
imagine it
those are
being.
current gen to me, damn it.
Yeah, I
But
know.
yeah,
For most people, they are because you can't get a freaking new Xbox or
yeah.
PS5. But yeah, anyway, Game Pass, and it is for those previous consoles. So, but you can get it on Game Pass on the newer systems and whatever. And I'm like, you could definitely play it on PlayStation. I'm sure it's like under 20
Mhm.
bucks. And if you're into that stuff, really cool game. But
Yeah.
I've talked enough, Mario.
Yeah, so for me, I binged all of season 3 of The Boys, and
Nice,
I'm happy to report that that show has not lost any kind of anything through
really
3
good
seasons.
season.
If anything, yeah, season 3 was like as sharp and as shocking as any of the 3 so far, and the social kind of geopolitical commentary is starting to get real biting, and
Yeah,
the superhero stuff is extra kind of fun and crazy and absurd and outlandish,
yeah.
and no, I can't say enough things about the writing, the acting, the execution. I mean, Anthony Starr is amazing as
He's
Homelander.
so good. I've never
He's
seen
so
someone play
good.
unhinged like that good in my life. Like
Yeah, but
believably
and
unhinged.
genuinely terrifying though
Yeah,
too. To know that this
unpredictable.
godlike, this,
Yeah,
as a Superman fan too, it really does like put it in perspective too how fortunate we are that Superman is kind-natured and that he was
yeah.
found by Jonathan and Martha. Because Homelander shows what happens if you got no parents at all and you end up just growing into a sociopath.
You remember
But
that quote that one of our listeners showed us actually from the comics where like Batman's commenting on Superman and he's like, he's a god that flies up like by the sun and like how lucky we are that it never occurs to him that he's a god. And it's like Homelander,
yeah,
it did occur to him and that's what
yep,
happens. And it's very
yep.
bad. Very
And
bad.
seeing how he's harnessing that energy and all that, there's very
Yeah.
clear, comparisons to things happening in the current landscape here in this
Yeah.
country. So, yeah, no, I loved season 3 of The Boys, and I was super
Really
bummed
good.
when I realized I did it already. Like, I got to the last episode. I'm like, what, already? But
Yeah.
yeah, so I blew through that in like 3 days. And then I was surprised that Cobra Kai season 5 arrived on my doorstep without any kind of fanfare. I didn't realize we were that close to receiving it.
Yeah.
You don't do Cobra Kai, right? That's not your
I
thing.
have absolutely no interest.
Well, you can go straight to hell with your lack of interest.
I'm
But for
sorry.
me, Cobra Kai
I know
is
people listen,
life.
people love it. I'm in the minority probably, but whatever.
Well, on top of that, you're just a little too young. You didn't grow up with that. I love the Karate Kid.
Yeah, I
Daniel
didn't have
San
that like
wasn't a
yeah, I have
hero of
no
yours.
nostalgia
Yeah.
for it at all.
Yeah. See, for those of us who grew up in the
Yeah.
earlier 80s, I was born in 83. Karate Kid was like, That was
Yeah.
everything. So getting to re-explore that world, but with a modern twist and in the tone and approach that they've used for this show is like amazing. And so far I'm like halfway through. I've got 5 episodes into season 5 of Cobra Kai, and that's another one where as a fan I am just eating really really well. And I'm just those are the two shows I've watched, The Boys and Cobra Kai. In terms of
Nice.
playing, I've continued to delve further and further into Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which I know is going to give us some interesting stuff to discuss later on. So I'm
Yeah.
actually going to save whatever thoughts I have for that for the news that came out this week related to Assassin's Creed and what's
That's
coming
awesome.
next there. So with that in mind, let's get on into some of the more juicy stuff. Let's get into the Superman on film update for this week. Now, it's not juicy because there's some new news, because unfortunately there is not like a new rumor or new update that I could offer you. But as I've now had time, I've had a week to sort of unpack these rumors and unpack this feeling that this really is going to happen, that we're going to have Henry back in some capacity as Superman, and then we're going to have Affleck back in some capacity as Batman, and that they're no longer going in the direction of writing those characters out and introducing new versions and new stand-ins for which Batman is the main Batman and all that kind of stuff. So I've had a lot of time to think about that, see some of the responses online, and kind of just I have some stuff I want to share on that. All right. So while we're in this zone here for the Superman on film update, I want to tell you about why I think that Henry Cavill returning and Ben Affleck returning, why that is actually the right move for DC on film. Because I know there are fans who are actually quite disappointed. There, I know our friends over at Batman on Film. I saw Jonathan Brady, my writer for Revenge of the Fans back in the day. There are people who were very much enjoying that we were heading towards the multiverse. The fact that we were heading more into little pocket universes where each character can really just kind of stand on its own and not be tethered to some grander continuity. And people were just really, people were digging that we weren't going to try to copy Marvel, so to
Right.
speak. But honestly, with the current juncture, since we cannot hard reboot, since at this point we are married to previously existing versions of these characters and previously existing castings for these characters, if you're Warner Brothers Discovery coming into this situation right now, you're thinking about how do we have cohesion? How do we have consistency? How do we keep this thing going? Because we can't go from scratch. We can't hit the hard reset and just go, okay, we're going to reintroduce all of these characters with new actors, with
Right.
no baggage anymore. They don't have that option. So if you're going to have this scenario where you have a universe that is comprised with reconstituted parts of what's been airing for the last 9 years, what DC has been since 2013, plus a bunch of new characters that are seemingly going to interact with those older characters, like Black Adam bringing in Amanda Waller from Suicide Squad. This universe is for better or worse, it's a little bit of a Frankenstein monster. It's a bit of a
Yeah.
patchwork of new stuff and old stuff. And with that being the case, it makes sense then, for the sake of having consistency, that if Warner Brothers Discovery was able to get these guys on the line and to sign new deals, because to be like, well, listen, rather than continuing to splinter off our universe, we want to make it more focused. We want to have a more, a shared, coherent, unified vision here for this universe. If we're going to do that, then we can't suddenly bring in Michael Keaton and have him be the stand-in Batman. No, we need the Batman who's been established in the public eye on film for 6 years now. We need that guy. And if we're going to have a Superman show up in any of these movies, rather than have it be a generic faceless Superman and then introduce an all new one in the Ta-Nehisi Coates thing that would have nothing to do with the rest of this, it's just further splintering the universe. We just need to bring back the Superman that currently works. The Superman that currently exists. You want to have consistency. If we're going to have Momoa and Gadot and Miller for now, if we're going to have these other holdover Justice Leaguers, it doesn't make sense to not have just all of them back. You know what I mean?
Right.
And especially because like with what's gone on in recent years, they've already shown that like they can make a movie that sort of reboots the property without hitting reset, like what happened with Suicide Squad. Because what did James Gunn do there? He didn't go back from scratch. He took what he liked from the David Ayer thing and put his own spin on it. And with these other heroes, especially with Superman, you could do that. In
Yeah.
theory, if they decide, you know what, Henry, that there's still some mileage there, there's still some meat on the bone for this version of Superman, they know that they can just make a movie that has a different creative sort of energy behind it, but that he can shine. I mean, that's what happened with Aquaman when Jason Momoa's Aquaman, which had just been in a Justice League that had flopped hard in 2017, who had made his debut in a BVS that was a total polarizing sort of situation for the DCEU. That Aquaman had $1 billion movie because he was directed by James Wan, and it looked and it felt very different than what had come before it.
Yeah.
So if you're Warner Brothers Discovery, you're looking at Henry Cavill Superman and you're going, why are we going to start from scratch when we could just get this guy a better creative team and tell some fresh stories? Because this audience out there has already shown that they're willing to overlook past movies as long as what's coming looks exciting. So
Yeah.
I feel like if you're the people coming in, you don't want any more further splintering off or muddying of the waters, where now here's going to be Michael Keaton and we're going to write out Batfleck and we're going to have this Batgirl movie, but that it isn't really related to any kind of real other Batman plan because the other Batman series has nothing to do with that. Like they got to simplify the narrative. They got to streamline this thing and make it as simple as possible. And rather than releasing things like Batgirl, which just looking at the stills looked like a crappy Arrowverse movie. And, just looking at that, it really was kind of overblown that they canceled that, by the way. It sounds like, I think.
Yeah, I saw there was someone, an exec said that.
Yeah.
I did see Brendan Fraser apparently threw some shade
Yeah.
at that exec. But what he said was that, it was shot for the small screen. So it was probably going to look a little probably better than a CW show, but it definitely was going to not
the suit didn't inspire a lot of confidence.
Yeah, I mean that is the suit from the comics, but yeah, I know it didn't look maybe wild on the stills and stuff, but we never got to see it with like the right coloring and the right lighting. Like the thing is like we always talk about that. Like they do a lot of stuff like in post.
No, there was a promo still, and even the promo still, I was
still
like,
no. I mean, it was definitely going to be a lighter fare. I mean, like. But I understand why they did it. But people made a really big deal out of it.
Is I think they pulled the rug out from under this idea of Keaton being the new mainstay Batman. I really think now he's officially just going to be. His relationship to that Flash movie will be the same as Tobey Maguire's relationship to Spider-Man No Way Home. A really, really special, once in a lifetime extended cameo. Pinch yourself. Can't believe I'm seeing this type of thing. But he's not. I think that original plan has gone out the window. With the new regime, with the new ownership, they're like, screw this multiverse thing, screw green lighting all these random movies about B and C level DC characters. We need to make let's get our AAA characters up and running in sustainable franchises and get people excited for crossover events and all that sort of stuff. That's what they want to do. And if that's what you're going to do, you bring back Henry and you bring back Ben. And that's why I feel like it is the right move. Because the only opposite thing to do would do the hard reset, but we're not doing that. So if we're not doing a hard reset, bringing back Henry and Ben is absolutely the right call. Did you have anything you want to say about that?
If they want to make money, they have to keep the whatever little momentum they have right now. Like if you do a hard reset, everything comes to a screeching halt. You have to redevelop everything. Then you're not looking
and
at
they've got
getting any of
movies
these
coming
characters
out for a year and a half still.
Yeah. And they already have stuff coming out that's already in this plan. And then you're talking, if you want to start from scratch, you're talking like you're not seeing any of those movies. A new Superman or Batman movie that's going to be part of a connecting universe. You're not going to see that for at least 3-4 years. Yeah. So like they can't afford to do that. They have some stuff out there. get everyone, if they can get the people back, which is like, that's like basically the biggest part of it. Can you get Affleck back? Can you get Cavill back? If they got them
Yeah.
back, if that's indeed the truth and that's what they're moving forward with, at least you can carry some momentum forward. Like you said, put the right team in place and, soft reboot them or just steer them in a different direction. It's totally possible. James Gunn, like you said, James Gunn is a perfect example. He did it with the Suicide Squad. It did not erase or say that the other stuff didn't happen. It
Yeah.
just continued off of it, and it just was a totally different adventure. And
Yeah.
so it's very possible. And listen, you can't make everybody happy, but it is what
No.
it is.
But
So,
also, too, something I was thinking about also, like, if you're Warner Brothers Discovery, remember, you're coming into this and you didn't spend any of the money on these previous things. You weren't there when BVS didn't meet internal projections. You weren't there when Justice League opened to only 92 million and no one gave a damn about it. You weren't there for even when Zack Snyder got an extra 70 million to do his cut, because that was under Warner Media's jurisdiction.
yeah.
Warner Brothers Discovery is coming in with a fresh bankroll, having not spent a dime on the things that came before. And if you're tasked with looking at our DC on film situation, if you just watch all the movies without being worried about what they did, what was spent on them, all the projections, if you just watch the storyline, you go Man of Steel, BVS, Suicide Squad, Justice League, even into the stuff that's come since then, like Aquaman and all the other stuff, you realize, like, the story is open still. All those characters were never definitively, like, ended. Like, Justice League
Right.
does end with this table of 7 chairs and room for more. Like, the actual storyline that has been put out in front of mass audiences is still kind of open. And that's what makes it interesting too, because there was like a rumor that hit, that I don't believe, by the way, but there was a rumor that hit this week about a potential Justice League 2 movie being kind of, put slowly into the works. And while I don't think that's happening right now, I don't think it's beyond the realm of possibility, because
Right.
with new ownership and a fresh new outlook on this, what's to say that this team of people who's coming up with the 10-year plan doesn't realize, like, notices that, you know what, where we've left every character, where Superman left off at the end of Justice League, where Ben Affleck, where Batfleck ended up at the end of Justice League, where Aquaman ended up at the end of his movie, where things end up at the end of this Flash, there's actually a way to make a Justice League event film in the next few years. We just got to be strategic in how we do it, because these characters, like, I just feel like if you're coming in and you're looking at these movies and you're not worried so much about the money and the critical response, and you're just looking at, well, what do the fans out there know? What is the storyline? What are the open threads? Which characters have been left with room to go someplace next? I feel like it's almost like having a blank slate with where to take them next from here.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to point that out too. Having the new ownership and new creative eyes looking at things, if they just went home and binged the DCEU from 2013 through 2022, there could be a path that comes built directly out of what's already been established.
Yeah.
And therefore hitting that hard reset might be completely ridiculous of them to do. So I feel like if you're going to do this thing where you're going to keep stuff that worked and you're going to still introduce new stuff, then bringing in Henry, bringing in Ben is the right call. And in general, I think Warner Brothers Discovery has the right idea on how to do all this. I am so on board with the rumors and the direction things are heading in so far.
Yeah.
And also because, like, with this Black Adam thing, it got me thinking, because if it's true that Henry is going to be making his grand re-debut with the red cape next month in that Black Adam movie and some post-credit sequence, I think it's such a neat way to bring him back into the public conversation, especially if Black Adam does what Dwayne Johnson wants it to do. If this becomes some runaway hit that it's the fans are behind it, the box office numbers are high, the critics at least don't hate it, it's at least somewhat positive. If this is one of these runaway things that makes $900 million and is a big, like, franchise launcher, the optics for Henry Cavill's Superman are very, very bright. It brings him back attached to something that's buzzworthy and exciting. You know what I mean? As opposed to linking him to perhaps, like, just Ben Affleck or just something that came before that kind of reminds people of a more divisive time in DC on film.
Yeah.
Having him show up against Black Adam, who in theory will be very, very popular once he makes his debut now, I think it brings Henry back in an interesting light, and it's a cool way to
Yeah.
reintroduce him. And while thinking about that, though, I know that Dwayne has brought up in the past this idea about the fight between Black Adam and Superman. And it seems like whatever this tease is, it would be related to this fight between Black Adam versus Superman. And I realized, I think he's approaching this like a wrestling angle. He's treating this like the way Vince McMahon treats WrestleMania, because it's notorious. WWE is notorious for deciding what it wants its main event to be way in advance and kind of working backwards from there. Them knowing, okay, who are going to be our two marquee characters? Who are going to be the two titans that the fans are going to be on their feet paying money to watch this fight because they're bought in. They believe in the hero, they believe in the villain, and they decide what that matchup's going to be, and then they start to put all the pieces in place and get that and start building that feud, so that now suddenly you have 87,000 people in a football arena screaming at the top of their lungs over a fight they know is fake, but they're just so caught into they're so bought into these characters. The Rock understands the power of that, of like when you can harness that fan energy and get them to be like, I gotta see this fight. I feel like he's approaching Black Adam versus Superman as like his WrestleMania main event, and he's going to start putting the building blocks in place, and it's not. I'm sure he's not the only one who would approach it this way at $7, because they're in his production company. One of his right-hand men is a guy named Brian Gewirtz. And Brian Gewirtz was a writer for WWF through the whole Attitude Era. Like he was well, not through the whole time, but he was there during the rise of The Rock, especially. And he was someone who came from the wrestling world, but when The Rock went to Hollywood, he brought Brian with him. And you could totally kind of see the two of them spitballing about how to, build up this fight to with Black Adam and Superman. And I see parallels where, like, if you're in a meeting coming up with how do we make our big payday, if you've decided that your main event, your big payday is that showdown between Black Adam and Superman, you start building appropriately and building to that. So I feel like Black Adam is going to be step one. Who knows what's going to be step two? But I for one am excited for it, because I know Black Adam is traditionally a villain for Shazam, but I think there's something there, especially in that trailer. Circling back to what we discussed last week, it looks so Man of Steel-y, and he looks like an anti-Superman, and that's a fight I want to see happen. That's a fight I want to see happen. The only thing that I feel is going to hurt it is that I don't think they're going to go full villain with Adam. I feel like he's going the anti-hero. So I feel like at some point they're going to have to do the same exact pivot as Batman versus Superman, where we're fighting each other at first, but now we're uniting against a common enemy.
I think the new trailer basically shows that, like, it's going to be like a battle with the JSA, and then eventually, what's this guy, Succubus or something like that? What's his name?
I don't know.
He's like a big red, like, Satan demon guy. Like, then he's gonna have to. We have to team up and take down this guy because he's gonna really mess up the whole world. And then you deal with me later. But
and that's what's gonna happen in Black Adam. But even in whatever the Superman conflict, I think it's gonna have to happen again. Because why would Superman even want to confront Black Adam unless he's being heelish again? He's being a villain again. So I feel like at the end of this movie, it still has to end in some way where Adam, needs to be brought to justice by the champion of justice. So even though there's going to be somewhat of a we're working together, something else is going to go on there where he's still going to end up somewhat in villainous territory, so that for the confrontation with Kal-El.
Absolutely.
So very intrigued by all that. And now I'm also intrigued about something else, Brett. And we're going to move out of it. We're going to come back to Superman a little later because there's some Superman and Lois stuff I want to touch on.
Sure.
But our conversation last week about Never-Ending Story got me thinking, Bretterson.
Yeah.
That it's interesting that, like, if you bring up a remake to someone, like if I would have told you, they're going to make a remake of Never-Ending Story, what would your reaction have been?
Yeah. Oh wow, this is already interesting. I know. Yeah. I don't know. I think I would just be like, okay, cool. I'll probably
Right? Like
maybe
you'd
see it
roll,
just for the nostalgia.
yeah. But I feel like you'd roll your eyes almost because like, oh, they're
Yeah.
remaking Never-Ending
But
Story.
how
Great.
jazzed was I last week when we
Yeah,
talked about it being an
a
adaptation,
TV series. Yeah,
not an adaptation, but an adaptation.
an,
Yeah.
an adaptation. But
Yeah.
yeah, and just in general, that got me thinking about how like in the last few years, the way that's like the way that whole thing has evolved, and how it's no longer. I mean, I guess the big thing is remake movies are inspire eye rolls, and it's just like it seems like, oh god, it's just creatively bankrupt. You're going to the well again. Oh, what a disaster. It's instantly thought
Yeah.
of as yikes. But then you announce the same thing as, oh, but it's going to be a streaming 10 episode series, and all of a sudden it's the most exciting thing. And I'm looking around at like the rash of film series that are having all this success, right? You got House of the Dragon, which that's not based on anything like that, but Lord of the Rings, for example. Lord of the Rings isn't even an expansion of the movies. It's another adaptation of the
Yeah.
books, and yet it crashed Amazon. Like, 25
Yeah.
million viewers. Like, I'm sure if they would have announced that they're doing a remake of Lord of the Rings, people would have like been miserable about it. But a
Yeah.
TV series, we're all for it. Same thing with like Disney Plus is launching stuff like Willow and Cobra Kai itself is a sequel series. Like it
Right.
seems like Hollywood has figured out that rather than doing the remakes, it's much better to just take the IP and now adapt it for television. That somehow that avoids the eye rolls. Suddenly no one is complaining about a lack of creativity, even though technically it's the same thing. You're taking an
Right.
existing IP that's already been adapted, that's already been done big. You're just going to do it again. But since it's on TV, it's good. It's
Yeah.
just it's like a change in philosophy. And I just wanted to point that out. And it got
Yeah.
me thinking about an old conversation we had inspired by Isaac Wolf, our old pal Isaac, talking about like with video games, about how like maybe movies aren't the right medium for video game adaptations, that maybe series
Right.
are. And I feel like there's just some sort of connection there, because it does seem like long form episodic storytelling is something that pop culture is much more excited about lately than just a 2 or 3 hour movie, you know?
Yeah.
And I just, as we kind of track these trends over the years, I remember we used to talk about like the streaming wars, and we were there with like when cable was dying and streaming was becoming super important, and all the streamers were spending millions and millions of dollars on original IP. I remember when that was news, and now
Yeah.
it's just the norm. And now we just live in a world where like people just they want to be fed all these TV shows, even if it's based on stuff that they would have originally thought of as derivative copycat
Right.
nonsense if it was a movie.
I think it's the fact that you're serving it in a different format. Because like if I'm just
Yeah.
going to do a remake of a movie, you're either getting something shot for shot, so it brings nothing new to the table, like we've seen with a lot of, and that seems to be the case with the reception of a lot of these Disney remakes, which are
Yeah.
honed very close to source material. You're just giving it to me again. You put a different coat of paint on it. But when you do a TV, adaptation, I think it's much more interesting because you can tell a larger story. You don't have to rush story beats. Like when you
Yeah.
really think about it, 2 hours is not enough time to do shit. Like it's really not enough time to like build up like multiple
Yeah.
characters in a meaningful way where you care about them. I mean, like what's like the biggest criticism that most Marvel movies get? Like I mentioned it before, like the villain wasn't developed enough.
Yeah.
But when you have a TV series, you can develop a villain. Think about some of the great TV villains and like how like Dexter, the Trinity killer, like how he got built up over so many episodes and how more intriguing and creepy he was because of that. Like
Yeah.
most of the best villains of all time are part of long running trilogies or longer series of movies. Vader had 3 movies to build his hype up, even though when you really look back, he's not developed well. He was developed later more when you got the
Yeah.
backstory. But just when you have 3 movies, or in this case like 8, 9, 10 episodes, Kingpin, right? Probably still the best Marvel villain, right? I think.
Yeah.
Like just
And he
you
was
can
yeah.
tell better stories. Like we actually talked about a few weeks ago. They announced they're doing a BioShock movie, which
Yeah.
like I'm actually excited for that just because I love that world. Like that's an exception where like that world's incredible and whatever,
But I'm
but
sure you're more excited
would be
that it's a
way cooler
show
for it to.
rather than a movie.
No, it is a movie, and I wish
Oh,
it
it
were
is
a
a movie.
show.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I like I think about like wow, you could build a really cool long form series in that world,
Yeah.
and it'd be more engaging than just rehashing the story of the game because that was already incredible and that's cemented in my mind. And there's something also that you're gonna lose in translation. And actually, speaking of this, the Last of Us series that's coming out on HBO next year, I think is going to be phenomenal. But
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I think there might be something in it with the way that the game ends. No spoilers, even though the game's old, because the remake just came out, so some people are like experiencing it for the first time. But
Yeah.
the way that game ends, it hits very different because you're interacting with it in a very specific way, and you lose that when it's a
Yeah.
TV show or a movie. You're just
Yeah, yeah,
watching. You're
yeah.
passive. You're active, and that's why that ending also hits even harder in that game.
Mhm.
And that's something with the Bioshock too. There's a moment in that game where it totally fucks with your agency or you being a player playing a game. Like it does something on that meta level that you're
Yeah.
gonna lose. So that's also like trouble. I think why games don't always adapt well to film or television. But certainly the television route is just like I can't imagine like The Last of Us. Like you tried to take that game and just cram it into 2 hours, nothing would work. You'd have to just change
Yeah.
everything, and there would just be a different property. But as a long form series, and if you play that game and the way it's broken down into kind of seasons, oh my god, it's going to be that. I really can't wait. That's going to be, and it's HBO, so it's going to be a phenomenal show. And the
Yeah.
original writer and like creative director is involved with it, so it's going to be crazy good. But yeah, it's just interesting. But I get excited over more long form stories where we could really sink our teeth in. Like I'm enjoying this Lord of the Rings series like so far, you know what I mean? And I don't
Yeah.
know the Silmarillion and all these side pieces and these notes that apparently were never even published. Like that's what this is like based off of like scrap notes that Tolkien had,
Yeah.
and they're like fleshing it out. Guess what, man? It's beautiful, and I am engaged. Like I am in, and
Yeah.
it's again I want to experience. I like longer form
Yeah.
storytelling, and now that
Well,
like now the companies are ready to spend the money. I mean, that's the big thing too. Back in the day, I don't think people would. Maybe every once in a while you'd get like limited TV event, and they had like
yeah.
remember the Odyssey on NBC, and it was like 4
Yeah.
weeks or episodes, and like at the time I was like, this is the most incredible production ever. You go watch it now. It looks like community theater. But like it's funny, like but that was like a big thing. Now it's like they're like, no, we'll spend that money for like 10 episodes of multiple seasons of shows now. And it's like, oh, really? You're going to do that? Well, then give, if you're going to do that now, then give me that. You never
Yeah.
gave me that before,
Yeah.
So it's
Well,
like,
speaking of what they're
yeah.
going to give us in terms of
Oh,
long form TV adaptations of stuff,
yeah,
yeah,
give it
they're
to
going
me.
to do exactly that with Blade Runner 2099. A series has been greenlit over at Amazon Prime.
Yes.
And Brett, did you want to talk a little about that?
Yeah.
Like,
So,
how does that strike you?
yeah, I like I adore the original Blade Runner, the director's cut, of course. And I recently saw Blade Runner 2049, like I don't know, maybe earlier this year for the first
Yeah.
time, and I thought that movie was fucking awesome. It was
Oh, it
like
was amazing.
really,
Yeah.
yeah, it was really really good. So what's cool about this story is that that was Blade Runner 2049. So this series is gonna be Blade Runner 2099, and
Yeah.
supposedly this is gonna be the start of a new era for Blade Runner. The Ridley Scott is producing, and the writer of Blade Runner 2049, Michael Green, is also an executive producer. So if you
Yeah.
enjoy 2049, the creative forces behind that are producing the
And I'm pretty
series.
sure Michael Green wrote or co-wrote Logan, which is another one of my all-time favorites
Um,
of the last several years. So
yeah, I don't. Yeah,
Michael
it doesn't
Green's
say it in this
awesome.
article, but you might know that. And then
Yeah.
also they have a writer from that worked on the series The Leftovers, which was a really
Okay.
cool show on HBO. That is also their executive
I
producing.
did
So
the
it's got
leftovers. Yeah.
yeah, it's quite a pedigree here. So yeah, this is gonna be cool. It's gonna like I guess further the story and like the world of Blade Runner, and I think that's awesome. If Amazon's willing to spend the money that they should spend on this Lord of the Rings series, I think you're gonna have a beautiful, awesome, dreary neo noir like TV
Yeah.
show, and I think that's a cool niche. That's just a very again awesome lived in world and just very very vividly created and has great lore already. So there's such
Yeah.
a backdrop to pull from. I think that's awesome. So I am super excited for that series. I cannot wait. I'm sure we won't see it for like at least a year and a half. So
You remember they announced that Lord of the Rings series like 4 years ago. It took a while
yeah, I
to
know.
finally get that one. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure Blade Runner is going to take a
Um,
while too. So, but that's actually a really cool property to
yeah.
span out to a series.
And I think the big difference too, I mean, granted, this does not apply to the Lord of the Rings series, but I feel like the recent spate of TV shows based on old IPs, I think the reason that they're working and that they actually generate excitement instead of, ugh, really, is the fact that people like when you continue what happened,
Yeah,
as opposed to let's just forget it all and start from scratch. Like I think about what
yeah,
happened like with Ghostbusters, where it's like I don't even think it was necessarily that it was female Ghostbusters people didn't like. They just thought it was ridiculous that you acted like the events of the first films didn't happen. That you just
yeah,
completely went back to zero. I've always maintained that if they would have found a way to say that that existed in the world of the other movies, people
yeah.
might have given it a better shot. I feel like people are more prone to be like, okay, I want to revisit this beloved world and now have it expanded upon. Like that's what Cobra Kai is doing so well,
Right.
you know. So like when it comes to all that, I just feel like I lost my train of thought
I
real
feel like
bad.
you're dead to me.
I think I made my damn point. Is the
Yeah,
point?
you did make your point
But
though. Yeah.
I did make my point. Sequels, good. Remakes, bad. Give me more time in place I like. Okay. All
Yes.
right. Now, based on your wallpaper there, Brett, for those of you who are watching on the YouTube, I feel like our next topic has to take us over to the realm of Hyrule.
That's right.
So, what do you want to talk
Um,
about, Brett?
all right, so we had a surprise Nintendo Direct this week, just a couple of like 3 days ago, as of when this episode goes up, and there was a lot of little announcements, but the one that obviously I care about the most, and hopefully some of our listeners, I believe some of our listeners do, they finally revealed the title for the sequel to The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. So they have been calling this game the sequel to The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild for about like 3 or 4 years now, maybe actually almost 5 years. So we finally just got the title, and the title is not one that I think anyone guessed or was expecting, but
Yeah.
sticking with the formula, it's going to be called
Yeah.
The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom. Which I think is a very cool and intriguing title. I'm into it. I like it.
Yeah.
And along with that reveal, we got another little trailer which showed a lot of like mystical hieroglyphic type things on a wall that I'm sure like all the YouTubers are already pouring over and analyzing and getting all their lore ready. But there's some really cool, interesting things in there that get me really excited for the sequel. The other awesome thing is that they did announce a release date, and we know how Zelda games are; they always get delayed, they always move release dates. Why I think this one is going to stick, I think they feel confident about this. If they didn't feel confident about this date, I don't think they would have announced it, because so far everyone's like, this game's been delayed twice already. I don't really consider it delayed when they just announce like a possible release window or just put like a year up, because it's not like they announced like a date. They didn't. They just said
Yeah.
2022, and guess what? It's not coming now. So you could say it's a delay, but it's not like they were like September 5th,
Yeah.
2022. They didn't do that. So we got the date. I'm pretty sure they're ready to drop this game. It looks beautiful. It looks done. It looks ready. Also, I should finish in the trailer. We also got this really awesome shot of just Link opening these huge giant doors, and then very similar to that first shot in the beginning of Breath of the Wild where you run out to the hill and oversee, and he pushes these doors open and he's in this crazy golden sky island, and he just runs and straight up dives off the edge, and it's full Skyward Sword style, straight down dive and then into like a sky dive, and you can just dive through the air. There's all these huge islands in the sky. They're doing some really cool stuff with the geography. Even though it's the same Hyrule from the first game, it looks like they are manipulating it and giving some really cool new gameplay possibilities. We also see the shot of him, what it looks like there's like a rock on the ground, and it looks like he uses this like new skill he has to reverse time, causing the rock to rise back up into the sky. So I'm just like
Yeah.
thinking of the gameplay possibilities of just like
Yeah.
rewinding time and how that's going to affect the actual environment and like playing with time in that way.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just like the only thing they've really shown so far. You know, there's going to be more stuff. They haven't said shit about this game. Like they've been so tight-lipped.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's already like if you just fucking look it up. There's a bunch of cool YouTube videos already. People like already made, like I said, analysis videos. They have their lore explainers up, and it's great. Like I love, this is my favorite part of the Zelda cycle, is now like everyone just pouring over now, trying to see if there's anything in this trailer that can connect to the new one. Yeah, it just I cannot wait for this game. It looks tremendous. I think this is going to be it's going to be one of the first one's already like an all-time great, my
Yeah.
opinion, and I think a lot of people share this opinion. It might be one of the best video games ever made, and I don't know how they're going to do it, but it's Nintendo, and I think this game is going to knock our fucking socks off. Like I really I am over the moon hyped for this. So the release date, I should tell you, is May 12th, 2023. So, not that much longer, but still a little bit of a long wait, but
So
we're
that's
almost
the
there,
day
folks.
that your job has to know you will be sick
I'll
that
be
day.
taking that week off.
Yeah.
I'll be like, I need
Like,
to take vacation.
what
Yeah.
intrigues me about the title is that compared to most of the other ones, it seems the most narrative focused title.
Yeah.
Because if you look at most of them, a lot of them imply something about the central game mechanic or something like that. Ocarina of Time is about the ocarina, how you manipulate
Yeah.
time. Majora's Mask is about the mask. Twilight Princess is the whole thing about that day-night mechanic, and you're a wolf at night. And Skyward Sword, you're in the sky, and whatever. The names, a lot of time it has to do with like the way the game plays.
Yeah.
And even Breath of the Wild, I felt like it was implying that this open world is the biggest yet, and you're really out in the wild. It's the most like, we're not
100%.
holding your hand. You know what I mean? Like that title, even though it was about, let's say, the story, but it was also letting the gamer know what it's about. What the hell?
You know what? It's funny. That one
Tears of
really
the
isn't
Kingdom
about.
tell you?
Yeah, it's funny. That one really isn't about the story. That's literally more referencing just like
The game.
like you said, take a breath of the wild. Like it's also like breathing new life into the series, and like it was definitely symbolic. And this definitely, like you said, 100%
Tears of
seems
the
narrative
Kingdom
focused.
sounds it's going to be about the story. Otherwise,
Interestingly,
like,
I was like, interestingly enough, they have in the previous trailers, we have seen some new move or power that Link has, where he actually like goes into like a water droplet and rises up into the sky area. So that there
so
are these
then it is
tiers of some
connected.
kind. And then also on the hieroglyphs, you see like this weird figure, and there are 7 what look like little apostrophes, but kind of look like tears around them. So also people are speculating it's gonna be,
Okay.
and they said they didn't want to reveal it because the name of the game has major spoilers for the story, supposedly. So that's why they waited so long. But one last note: the little 7 tiers you see around, people are speculating, well, that was 7 sages from the past, and there's stuff like that. And then also people are speculating might be the return of dungeons, because we had like 4 kind of bigger dungeons in Breath of the Wild, and then the little shrines. This one, people are thinking that there's going to be some like actual big ass dungeons in this, plus with that open world gameplay, and I'm sure there's going to be little puzzles and maybe little shrines everywhere, or maybe the sky islands, and now you have a whole sky to explore and the whole ground, and supposedly they're saying that there's stuff underground as well. So this game is going to be layered. I mean, it is going to be just something that's going to be a treat. It's going to be a treat for us. We'll be eating good next year.
So we have an idea of what the future of Zelda looks like, and now we also have an idea about the future of Assassin's Creed, because there's been an update on where that much beloved series is heading. And why don't you clue us in on some of those directions we're heading there, Brett?
Yeah, so basically there was a Ubisoft Forward event last week, which was like a little presentation for them. It was honestly, it was pretty bad if you watched it. It was like pretty low energy, pretty bad. But the Assassin's Creed announcements at the end were cool. Unfortunately, as always happens with Ubisoft, like a week or 2 weeks ahead, like all that shit leaked. So like once that came out, it was like, okay, we kind of knew this already. But we got like little peeks and a little more insight into some stuff. So I'll kind of go through them quick, and then we'll have a little quick discussion. So the first thing is something we knew that was coming. It's called Assassin's Creed Mirage. So this is going to be a smaller Assassin's Creed game, and it is going to kind of leave the new gameplay that we've seen in like Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla behind. They're going to get rid of a lot of the RPG elements, all the loot, all the numbered items and stuff, bring it back to more of a stealth focused game, a la like Black Flag, Assassin's Creed 2, Brotherhood, Assassin's Creed 3, and like all the old school ones, if you want to call them old school. They're not even that old. So that's like really exciting. It's going to star Basim, who is a minor character in Valhalla.
Yeah.
He's like one of the hidden ones that actually settles there. It takes place
Yeah.
like 20 or 30 years before that. So he's like in his prime, like a young assassin in
Mm-hmm.
Baghdad during the 800s. So going to be cool.
That's
I'm
cool.
excited to go back to that old school gameplay, but now with
And
that, the modern flourishes and the way how smooth everything feels. Because I
Yeah.
recently just touched into yesterday I touched into Assassin's Creed Rogue, which came out like last gen after Assassin's Creed 4. It was kind of like it takes place in between 3 and 4. And I went to play that and I was like, oh, this feels a little it's not even an old game, but it feels a little janky compared to the new ones. The new ones are
Yeah.
just so smooth and everything. So I'm excited to get back to that because I was like thinking, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna like this again. And I'm like, oh, it's kind of janky. But it wasn't at the
Yeah.
time. This new one is going to be like not janky, but have like that old school gameplay. So I'm pretty pumped for that.
Honestly, that is music to my ears
Yeah.
because as someone who's going through Valhalla now after having played Black Flag,
Yeah.
that's one thing about Valhalla that is dropped for me. Like the gameplay to me feels a lot more flat. I miss the stealth. I miss the way the assassinations would take place. I miss the focus more on, the combat and the killing. This RPG stuff with the everything leveling up and all the and the loot and all that, it's not connecting for me as much as Black Flag did. And I haven't even played some of the older ones in the series, but from what I've read, those sound more my speed. That's one thing with Valhalla that's been stopping me from being totally obsessed with it, is that it is almost like too smooth, but also like the combat stuff, like it doesn't feel as visceral or intense or as tactile as it did in earlier, as it did in Black Flag. It feels more just like the combat and everything else is much more sterile and uninteresting. And less nuanced, and so if we're going to go back to something where the combat and the kills are more the focus and not just building up your character, I'm in. I'm very in.
So that's coming out sometime next year. We have no release date. The other thing that was announced, so like we had a rumor a while ago for like this new game or something called Assassin's Creed Infinity. And what it turns out what it was, and I think we might have talked about this a while ago, and I kind of suspected this. It's not a new game, Assassin's Creed Infinity, but it's going to be kind of like a new hub. So you'll have Assassin's Creed Infinity downloaded on your console, and then as they release like new games or like new areas, it's almost going to act like your own Animus, like on your thing. So you'll launch Assassin's Creed Infinity, and it's like, okay, from there I can jump into Assassin's Creed Mirage, or I can jump into these two new announced games. So continuing off of Valhalla, and I guess presumably following forward more and advancing this like RPG action game that it's become versus the action adventure game stealth game that it was, we are going to be getting finally a much requested area. We're getting Assassin's Creed Red is what it's called right now. It's going to take place in feudal Japan, and your main character is going to be basically like a shinobi. They said like live your shinobi fantasy. So you're going to be like a ninja during feudal Japan. So that sounds absolutely awesome, and I'm all in. Get me, I'm on board.
But see, I would like that more with like the stealth. More like the
and
old
hopefully they
approach.
will with that. Yeah. Maybe it will, but I don't want. I wonder if they're going to still keep going with this loot thing. But hopefully, if feudal Japan is a ninja, there better be a lot of stealth. You know what I mean, or cool gadgets. To like kind of advance the combat. Then they announced another Assassin's Creed game, and they said this one is going to be a very different type of Assassin's Creed game. So like we don't know what that means yet, but it's called Assassin's Creed Code. I guess it was Codename Red was the other one. This is called Codename Hexe. And what it actually is it's going to take place. There were like basically like, witch trials during the end of like the Roman Empire. So even before we had the Salem witch trials. So it's going to take place in that period. And they showed like a cool little CG trailer, and there were like weird Blair Witch looking things that look like an Assassin's Creed symbol, and supposedly it's going to be like a horror leaning Assassin's Creed game. So kind of a big message from Ubisoft in general was that they want to stop kind of making games by committee that are going to be just like, this kind of catch-all, like, well, we have to please as many people as possible with this game, so it has to have this type of element and this, because I think that has hurt the series over these last couple, Origin, Odyssey, and Valhalla.
Yeah.
They're too much. They're way too big. Like, I put 100 hours into Odyssey and I still had like huge swaths of the map that I hadn't even gone to yet. And I was like, I'm done. I can't. There's too many icons.
Too much.
And Valhalla, I kind of fell off of too. I'm actually probably pretty close to the end story wise, but I was just like, I put like, I don't know, 80 something hours into it already. And I was like, oh my God, there's like no end in sight. And it's also the way I play. I'm a psycho and I have to do like every side quest and then I prolong everything. So it's my own fault. I could just go in and like, I might hop back in there and just like beeline it and just do story and just get through it. But anyway, what they want to do, Ubisoft, is basically make games that like are more like narrowly focused and for specific groups of people. So like, you know what? We're not going to worry about making this Assassin's Creed accepted by the people who like the new style and the old style. Like maybe the Japanese one, the one in Japan, they're going to say, no, we're making this for the stealth fans. Is this for the ones who want stealth Assassin's Creed? We're going to make this game like that. Now we're going to make this horror Assassin's Creed over here. Not everyone's going to like it, but we're going to have a bunch of horror fans that are into it. And then like,
see, this worries me though, because this feels to me like what happened with Resident Evil there, where like it started off one way and it was survival horror,
went very action.
1, 2, 3, 4, but then they started like, here's like an on rails shooter, and here's a multiplayer based shooter, and here's like, they suddenly veered off into these different genres. And then even the core main series became more of like a Gears of War retread instead of survival horror. So it seems to me like Assassin's Creed is heading down that path also, where like,
well, they've kind of done that.
Confused about its identity now.
Yeah, they're an action RPG. They used to be an action adventure stealth game. Now they're an action RPG. And then, but I think, that. Yeah, so
like, I get adding
probably
new
keep doing
gameplay.
that, but
but like I get adding new gameplay and trying to push new story fronts and all that sort of stuff, invigorating the franchise. But like changing genres mid series to me is like, especially if it's working. It's one thing of like, oh well, these ones done in this style are flopping, but there's interest in the concept, so let's tweak the gameplay. It was like, no, you had it figured out, man.
No, I think people love the old style of game, but sales-wise, they were starting to sell less. And at the time, because this is fandom, people were bitching like, "Oh, it's the same game over and over again. It's coming out every year, and it's the same game." So they changed something different, and some people got mad, but a lot of people were like, "Oh, it's kind of cool." But now we've had like 3 games in that, and they've been like massive. The games they're too fucking big. Let's just say it. They're too fucking big. And I think now people are like sick of that too and want to go back to the old style. So it's like. But, I think what they've been trying to do is please everybody with these games. And that's why they've gotten so out of hand, because it's like, well, we have all this kinds of stuff for those people. And I think maybe it will be good to do a more narrow focus, and maybe everyone won't appeal to everybody, but like there'll be a game for each subset of the fandom. And maybe that's the way to go. I don't know. I like smaller, tighter focus games. So I'm very excited for Mirage. That's going to be just like a small city, very dense, 15, 20 hours, not going to suck away my whole life. It's going to just, get to the point.
That's the one that has me the most intrigued. And then the one about feudal Japan as a shinobi. Okay. But
it's ancient Japan, of course. I'm into it. It's awesome.
But Mirage is for me where it's at.
For sure.
But where it's not at for Disney. Where it's not at for Disney is that Patty Jenkins Rogue Squadron movie. Because did you hear about this? It was announced on Thursday that it has been pulled from the lineup
quietly,
and
quietly just whoop. We're just gonna yank that one away. Don't tell anybody.
Yep. So it was announced maybe 2 years ago that Patty Jenkins had been hired to do it. And then something happened. WW84 happened, and nobody really liked it. And suddenly we heard that there was creative differences. Listen, when it comes, hang on, but just to kind of like the foreshadowing to what happened on Thursday was last year when we heard that there was some creative clashes going on, and that the film had been sort of delayed and was kind of back up in the air. So when that happened, and then now leading to today, it getting pulled from the schedule, I
Yeah.
think it more or less means that this Rogue Squadron movie
Yeah.
isn't happening.
The writing was
And
on the wall when they
the
delayed it,
writing was on
and
the
I was like,
wall,
okay, it's not going to
and
be it.
I don't mean to disparage WW84, but unfortunately, Hollywood is a very "what have you done for me lately" kind of town. And even though Patty Jenkins had Monster and Patty Jenkins had Wonder Woman, so clearly she's shown that she is a very, very capable director. I think Wonder Woman 84, the fact that, like, it got a 58% on Rotten Tomatoes. The fan base was kind of vocally sort of split on it online. And unfortunately, we'll never really know what kind of box office it might have had because it was released on COVID Christmas at the end of 2020. So it's one of those things where, like, maybe if Wonder Woman 84 had come out and been as loved as Wonder Woman and had
Yeah.
overperformed at the box office the way that film had, maybe Patty might not have had any, hit any creative walls at
Yeah.
Lucasfilm. But maybe with that, with 84 kind of being a bit of a, it might have given Lucasfilm a little more pause on accepting her ideas and just trusting that she knows exactly what she's doing. And that's the thing. It might have been great. It might have been great. But in this town that, has a very short attention span. And on top of that, I mean, Lucasfilm in general, if we go back to when Lucasfilm was sold to Disney, the amount of plans that have been announced and changed since 2014,
Yeah.
it's staggering. You know what I mean? They're like
Crazy. Yeah.
from Josh Trank's, bounty hunter movie that was announced and then didn't happen, to Lord and Miller doing the Han Solo movie but getting fired quietly along the
Yeah.
way, to, like,
Colin
Colin
Trevorrow.
Trevorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
With
Colin Trevorrow being
9.
hired for episode 9 and then that disappearing. And,
Yeah.
like, Kathleen Kennedy has shown that, like, she doesn't care if it's been announced. If it
No fucks to
doesn't come
give.
together in a way that she's feeling, bye-bye. I don't care what you've
Yeah.
done, you're out of here. So, but yeah, so this is just the latest thing under the new, it's funny, not even, at this point, it's been 7 years. Oh, no, actually 8 years. But under the new Lucasfilm, it has this isn't new, that something gets announced with an exciting director and an interesting concept, and then it completely just goes the way
Yeah.
of the
It wasn't even just like announced though, like it was a tweet. Like they had like a little video introduction. She talked about it, like how she has a connection to the Air Force with her
Yeah, that's
father.
right. Her
And that was
father
like,
a
and then it was like
pilot.
not long after they're like creative differences. I was like, come on, like let them fucking make. They're a little like maniacal with the control and
I
stuff.
know.
And listen, I don't think. Like, I mean, I think we talked about this like briefly before the podcast. I'm not going to go into like a big whole thing on it, but uh, a summary, and I think maybe the full script, but like I read like basically a summary of Colin Trevorrow's episode 9 script, so that it's out there what the story was going to be. And listen, everything's an opinion. I like The Last Jedi. I actually liked The Last Jedi more than I liked The Rise of Skywalker. I didn't think it was a great end for the series, unfortunately. As much as like I still had fun and enjoyed all 3 of those movies, but it didn't like hit the highs that I wanted it to.
Yeah.
If you read the summary for Colin Trevorrow's episode 9 script, it really picked off and continued the stuff laid down by Rian Johnson in episode 8.
Mm-hmm.
And in my opinion, was like a much better story and much more fitting ending. Would it have satisfied every Star Wars fan? I don't know, but it still would have been. It would have made that trilogy, I think, not look down upon so much. And I think
That's a
would have,
shame. Yeah.
kept the trilogy like higher ranking, and definitely would have been an improved, ending, like bookend to that.
Yeah.
It's a real shame. Yeah.
I don't know all the specifics, but I almost feel like I would take whatever that would have been over what we got. And I
Yeah.
didn't hate The Rise of Skywalker. There's
Yeah,
an
I didn't
episode of
hate
this
it,
show
but
where
it
I'm
just wasn't.
defending the hell out of it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, as I reflect back on it as a Star Wars fan, and even as I saw it, I think for like the 3rd or 4th time, it was not the best finale to this
No.
Skywalker saga. It was not the fitting, perfect conclusion to the story that began in 1977. It
Yeah.
was it was it was just a movie. It was just their
Right.
attempt to try to tie up loose ends and, you know, appeal to nostalgia and send you home happy, as opposed to making any kind of bold choices and putting these characters in situations that we didn't see coming and ending with some kind of shock. Yeah, it just, Rise of Skywalker did leave something to be desired, and
Yeah.
maybe
Can I
they
tell
should
you
have let Trevor go.
a couple of
Tell me.
cool things? I'll go like just
Sure.
a couple of cool bullet points. So, I mean, if you guys don't want to know what it was, the episode 9 from Ferraro, then I guess don't listen right now. But basically, I'll give you a couple of things. First of all, Palpatine did not come back. They didn't
Thank
shoehorn
God.
that crap in, which kind of, weakened
That already sells it for me.
weakens the the importance of Vader's sacrifice in the original
Yeah.
trilogy. Then also Kylo Ren does not get a redemption arc. He's bad through and through, and he stays bad, which is what they should have did instead of just trying to make him another Vader
Another
character,
Sith. They got, like
another Sith
returned
who
to
was
the
like, oh
light.
no, I shouldn't have did that. I'm better now. So that's other big thing. But the last thing was that the final battle was like a showdown, like a badass showdown with Rey and Kylo, and then she ends up getting a help from like Force Luke, Force to Obi-Wan, and like Force like Yoda or something like that. Like all of them come back and she gets like help from them or something. And I was
Yeah.
like, that would have been the fucking most coolest epic thing
Yep.
ever. And that's what people probably wanted. And then Disney was like, no, we're just going to have J.J. Abrams rewrite this whole thing in too short amount of time. And then
I
we're
know
going to
what
just
happened though.
throw everything
What
away.
what
Yeah.
happened was The Last Jedi was, it took risks. It was bolder, but it didn't end up doing the business of The Force Awakens, and the discourse online was much more divisive. So
Yeah.
they panicked and they were like, well, we can't do another thing that's like The Last Jedi. We got to send them home happy. We got to give them a crowd pleaser. So let's just play the hits, and they got Abrams to put together a nice nostalgic patchwork to end on a nice happy note. But
Yeah.
I swear it's because of The Last Jedi they got freaked out. I
Yeah.
think like they let Ryan Johnson try some new stuff, and for the people who loved it, it worked. But I don't. I think the reaction to that film is why ultimately we got an episode 9 that played it so safe and so square.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a shame because like
but
if Trevorrow's
yeah,
episode 9 went up, I think people who did not like The Last Jedi may have actually been able to kind of look back on that, and then looking at the whole, it might have like retroactively lifted it up for them. I feel like, in my opinion,
yeah,
but
yep.
hey, what are you gonna do? What could have been?
Yep. Now to wrap up episode 163, I want to bring it back to our boy Superman, because Superman and Lois, some news has come to light, and I think we got to unpack it a little bit, especially because a couple months ago, when we were discussing the finale for season
Yes,
2, you brought up the tease about Intergang that had come up, and now with this casting that's been revealed, I think now is a good enough time to kind of start,
sure.
diving into that a little bit. So they cast the actor who played Tyrese in The Walking Dead. His name, so I can do this right, is Chad L. Coleman. Chad L.
Yes,
Coleman will be joining the cast of Superman and Lois as Bruno Mannheim, the head of Intergang. Now, let's talk this through a little bit, just a little like history with Intergang, and even
yeah,
like Bruno Mannheim. He actually first made his first appearance in the Jimmy Olsen line of comics, in the Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, and he was hired by he was the son of Moxie Mannheim, the leader of the Intergang, and he was sent to kill Jimmy. Now, I don't think it's going to go that way, because Superman and Lois doesn't really have a Jimmy right now.
yeah,
And I don't think that they're going necessarily with him being the son of Moxie, but we're going to see how this goes.
sure.
But the point is, while that's his original introduction, Bruno Mannheim and Intergang, they are one of the two main crime syndicates in Metropolis that have managed to flourish even under Superman's watchful eye. There's two main ones. There's the 100, and then there's Intergang. And in one of the main continuities, which may be where they're going with this now, Intergang eventually kind of has some interesting technology, weapons and things far beyond what regular criminals have. And what you eventually discover is that they have weapons from Apocalypse, that they're actually
Uh,
being used as the first wave of an eventual invasion by Darkseid and the new gods. So that's what makes things interesting here, where, okay, we're bringing in Bruno Mannheim and Intergang, but are we using the Intergang as a conduit to Darkseid? It's
oh.
going to be interesting to see if that's where they're going with this. Superman and Lois so far has been pretty bold in some of their creative choices and where they're going with things, to now suddenly go for an elite level villain like
Yeah,
Darkseid.
that's gonna have to be
Uh,
pretty serious if you're gonna do
that's
that.
serious, and they're going big. They're going big, and especially if we're at a time where, like, the fact that Zack Snyder's Justice League is what stopped Ava DuVernay from making a new Gods movie, but now the team at Superman and Lois is like, yeah, but we feel totally fine treading on
Yeah,
that territory, and they may have gotten the green light to tread on that territory.
yeah,
So it's interesting with Superman and Lois, with the budget that it's had, with the creative writing that it's had, with the way that it's been presented thus far, seeing them tell a story of the Intergang and possibly getting us into Darkseid and the new gods and all that, I'm very, very interested. A part of me wonders if that's like seasons 3 and 4 there. You know what I mean? Like
yeah. It
season
could be
three
the
might all
Intergang is
be,
season 3, and then that sets
yeah,
up for Big Bad season 4 and
yeah,
Dark Side. Yeah,
yeah,
could be really
And
cool.
then one of the other interesting things about this casting and about where they seem to be going with this is that when it comes to Lois, okay, um, let me just read this to you, because Lois, okay, for years, Lois has worked to prove that behind the facade of him being like this good person, that he's actually the head of a criminal organization, that he's not what he appears. It's very kind of like Morgan edgy,
Yeah,
but it seems like, I want to make sure I say this right. Bruno Mannheim is known to most of Metropolis as a local hero, a philanthropist. This season, we'll see Lois take on Mannheim in her capacity. So I'm just wondering, is he going to come to Smallville? Or are we actually going to have like a dual storyline where Lois is in Metropolis dealing with Mannheim stuff while Superman is dealing with something different? You know what I
I
mean?
was
Like, I
just
don't
gonna ask
know.
you, I'm like, do you think we'll actually maybe like get back into Metropolis like this season and spend some time there? And I
That's
mean,
what I'm
is that
wondering,
is
because
that budget gonna have to blow up a lot more?
I mean, let's be honest. It's going to be freaking Vancouver. It's going to be some other
Oh yeah,
generic, city,
yeah.
right? But yeah,
Who's got the
like
best tax credits?
yeah, exactly. But yeah, it could be an interesting way to go, because like I don't see Intergang setting its sights on a little town like Smallville. I don't see it. To me, it almost seemed kind of hokey,
Right. Like, what are you
especially
gonna
like
rob there? Like the
yeah,
diner that has $10 in the drawer?
exactly. So that's why I'm like, I have a feeling this implies that Lois is going to have a storyline that has her in Metropolis for a while, and Superman's going to have his own arc. And it might be interesting too, where like he's investigating stuff having to do with Apocalypse, and meanwhile Intergang is doing this stuff with with their advanced weaponry, and then eventually the two threads cross as he realizes that Bruno Mannheim has some link to Darkseid, that he's made
Right.
contact with the new gods. Whatever. I don't know which way they're going to go with it, but it's very intriguing. It's very exciting. If they're going to go the Darkseid route on Superman and Lois, I'm very, very interested in that,
Yeah.
because this team has won me over, and where they, what they can do with this IP and with these characters and with this mythology. It's also interesting too that Morgan Edge has been depicted in the past as a leader of Intergang, and that's his brother. So
Right.
I just wonder if they're going to find any other way to have Valzad. What's his name? No, he's not Valzad. What am I saying?
He's
Tal Rowe.
Talrow,
Tal
yeah.
Rowe. If they're going to have Tal Rowe somehow involved with this, I don't know. Either way, just because Morgan Edge's name comes up a lot in relation to Intergang.
Yeah.
So I just wonder if that's going to be if there's going to be any relation there also,
Yeah, I'm
But
curious, like, I wonder if they will, like, like you said, they get like a little fast and loose. They play around with like the characters. Like
Yeah,
I could totally see them doing the intergang thing, making us think Darkseid, but then it leads into like Brainiac. Maybe they have some rogue
yeah,
AI they picked up, and then like they kind of switch it on us that way, and
yeah.
find out that they've been getting
Or
directives from a computer or an AI, and then it's really
yeah,
Brainiac, and he comes in and they like, oh, we got you. You thought it was Darkseid because, like, I don't know, like he's like the ultimate, right? So I mean, like once you go there, it's like where do you go for the season after?
yeah,
So I feel like,
yeah.
but also Brainiac's up there too. I mean, he's like everyone wants fucking Brainiac. And they did him on remember the show they had with it was like Superman's great grandfather. What was
Yeah,
that
yeah,
called?
on Krypton. Krypton, they
It was
did
called Krypton.
they
Yeah,
did Brainiac there.
they did
Yeah.
do Brainiac
Yeah.
on there, and he was like kind of cool. But
Well,
you know.
speaking of twists though, so you got me thinking, right? Because like
Yeah,
when we met Irons, he was called Captain Luthor by the suit, and we thought
yeah,
he was a black Lex Luthor, and then we ended up finding out that he's Steel, right?
yeah,
And same thing with Morgan Edge, where he's introduced as one thing, but then we find out that he's actually Superman's brother, Tal-Rho, right? Like they're used to like introducing you the character one way, and then you find out it's actually a
yeah.
reinterpreted form of something else.
Yeah,
It'd
they
be
did the
interesting
girl
if
this season, and then they were like, "Oh, actually, she's the parasite woman."
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly.
She
So
was
it'd be
parasite.
interesting
Yeah,
if this Bruno Mannheim.
what a name, Bruno
Yeah, I
Mannheim.
know. But it'd be interesting if Bruno Mannheim isn't really what he appears to be. What if he is
Yeah,
one of the new gods in disguise? What if he's Darkseid? Because that
right.
actor has that deep voice, and he could look like Darkseid if you
Yeah, they could
CG'd him
try to
up a
do
little
something
bit.
like that. Yeah,
You know what I mean? So
totally.
like I wouldn't put it past them if all of a sudden we find out like, I'm not working with him. I am him, and the eyes
Yeah,
glow and he's freaking Darkseid. So uh I'm very, I want to see where they go with this.
yeah. I love this
And
show. We love this show. It's like,
yeah,
yeah, give it to me.
it's
You haven't let me
give it to
down
me
yet, so
now. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But I think that about does it. Unless you had anything else that you wanted to hit up before we wrap this thing.
I have one very brief thing. It's a new
Hit
segment
it.
that I don't know if it's gonna happen every week, but we're gonna do it, and it's called Brett Has Notes. All right, and I'm just gonna pick out a thing that I have some notes on, and this week's thing is just that intro, the Marvel Studios intro. It's too fucking long. It is too fucking long. Like every movie, it's like it feels like an hour. I know it's probably like 30 seconds. It feels like a fucking hour, and especially like week to week on She-Hulk, which is like a half a show,
Oh yeah.
like a half hour show. I'm like, this is half the show. Is I'm like, all right, like they're kind of like so far up their own ass a little bit. Like I'm like, okay, Marvel, like you're good, you did good, you got the studio, you're doing great. Like, but the fanfare for that long is way too much. And you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like as an example of one that I do like though, and I'm sure like I never actually timed them out, so someone's gonna be like, Brett, they're the same length, and maybe I'm an asshole. But the Star Wars one where it goes and it has like
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
lights flashing over the masks.
No,
That
that's
one's fucking
fast.
awesome.
That's like
It is
7 seconds,
fast
and
and
it's
it's
great.
fucking awesome and it gives me the feels every time and I love it. And Marvel needs to take a cue from that same company. Just guys, figure it out. Figure it out. All right. So that's this
Good.
week's Brett Has Notes, and we'll be back
All
with something
right.
else to give notes about maybe next week or maybe another time. But it's something that we're gonna do recurring. I'm gonna try to
Yes.
do it every
Yes.
week.
All right.
So hope you
All
enjoyed
right.
that.
Sounds good. And if you have anything that you want us to talk about, that you want us to have notes about, email them to thefanboypodcast@gmail.com. Follow us over on the Twitter @thefanboyshow. You could find me and Brett on the Twitter as Superman on Film and Super BrettCon, respectively. If you have not yet, please like, rate, and review the podcast on your podcatcher of choice. Leave us reviews. We will read them on the air and we will appreciate them oh so much.
Yes, we will.
So everyone, until next time, be kind.
And stay fanboy.
Adios.